Good afternoon and welcome to the next episode of the Existential Files. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Louie.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Louie. I hope you can edit this together into something.
Today we are joined by another very special guest, as all our guests are special. Today we are joined by former Trolley Dolly and now, well, soon-to-be former academic, Chrissy Wilson, Dr. Chrissy Wilson, who did her PhD with a supervisor that was my supervisor, Professor Christopher French at Goldsmiths University. So she's part of this little alumni that includes Itai Vitson, who joined us in one of the earlier podcasts, and managed to rope her in to discuss, or we don't really know yet. Do you want to finish off your introduction there, Chrissy? Was that, sorry, I wanted to call you a Trolley Dolly. You do talk about it on some of your stuff. So
I do. Hello, Matt. Hello, Louie.
Hello.
Very nice to join you this afternoon in this very sunny afternoon in Suffolk. I'm in Suffolk, in Ipswich. Yes, I was a Trolley Dolly. I was also an actress before that, which was quite an entertaining career path.
And this is not porn.
Not porn, no.
No. Disappointment. I won't bother looking then anyway.
I did whenever I give a talk, I always say exactly the same thing. I always say that, I was once an actress and my main claim to fame, was that I once played a prostitute on the bill. And
well, hey.
Yeah, and that seems to be the only thing that ever impresses anybody, actually.
So have you got an Internet Movie Database page then?
No. It was a very, very long time ago, and I looked very, very different. It was back in the 80s, before either of you two were born, probably. So no, it was a long time ago.
Oh yes, before I was born. Did you have lines?
Lines? I had lines. Right. Yes, I had. I had one line. But I milked it for all it was worth.
Was that the line?
Keep that truncheon away from me.
That's very good, Matt. Well, that was impressive.
You're the one who came out with it, whoever wrote it.
That was the line. That was the line, wasn't it?
Hello, we've done that joke. Hello.
We've done that joke, yeah.
So, but I assume these aren't the reasons why you're our esteemed guest on this podcast, Chrissy.
Well, we can talk about prostitution if you want, but we can talk about something else if you like. But no, I think what Louie and I were alluding to at the start was that I've decided to give up academia. I was indeed part of the Christopher French cabal, one of a group who we all kind of got our PhDs roughly about the same time, but we've all gone in very different directions, interestingly. But yeah, I've had like 10 years of academia, and God, I am so sick of it. I really am. I don't know if you've had other academia that you've interviewed.
Well, probably only me. I think I wanted to moan about it. So go on, Chrissy. What's the summary of your moan about it? Why are you giving it up?
Well, it's the students, I'm sorry to say. It's changed so much. I mean, now this wider participation stuff, I blame Tony Blair entirely. That it was a good idea to start off with. The idea that people from deprived backgrounds, etc., people who would normally not be able to go to university, lovely. Let's all have them coming to do degrees, which was a great idea. But unfortunately, because now universities get money because people pay their fees directly to the universities, they're just taking anybody off the streets. Anybody. I mean, they're not even having to meet the minimum criteria for entrance onto courses now. They're taking people that haven't even passed access courses. And so the people are starting degrees, and they just simply do not have the intellectual or personal resources to cope with it. And I don't know if Suffolk is unique in this regard, but we have a lot of students that have real problems with social anxiety, depression, and all kinds of really horrible stuff. And we all feel like we're social workers and counsellors as well as academics, and we're passing people, and they're going on to second year and third year, and they're just not good enough. And I just find it very frustrating that it's changed so much, and degrees are getting more and more dumbed down, and soon they're just going to mean nothing. So I just get a bit fed up with it, and I've kind of had enough.
And that was a party political statement for the Tory party.
For the Chrissy Wilson party.
For the Chrissy
I'll
Wilson
never be able to go back to work now. I've still got a month before I leave.
I was going to say,
I hope none of them listen.
Back to marking those scripts.
Yeah.
I do get where you're coming from, and I do realise that I think one of the consequences of the widening access thing does mean you are increasingly having people who you wonder if it's the best interest to actually be trying to work towards a degree.
Absolutely.
And I often felt as though when a lot of my teaching, a lot of mine now is focused on master's work. So therefore, you're having people who are mature students coming back, often funding themselves in terms of their degree, and are doing it because they really want to, and really coming back, and broadly speaking, not always the case, so much more enthusiastic about it. Whereas I found that when the focus was often on undergraduates, sometimes you find there's people you feel as though, the phrase I felt was, you're dragging them through a degree. They feel as though actually don't really want to be doing it. And if, as you've intimated there, perhaps they don't have the ability, then they probably should be best doing something else.
Yeah.
They don't need to be doing a degree. And then I started to question the value of a degree anyway, then, like you say, in terms of if you're then increasingly passing people that maybe they haven't met certain criteria. So I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So you're now going to vote with your feet and actually say, Matt, that's enough. I'm going to go off and do something else.
Yes, I am indeed. It's just to harp on about it because I'm on a roll now. I think we've got a duty of care to students, not to exaggerate their expectations, and we have to manage their expectations about what they're actually capable of. And there's no point telling a whole bunch of first years, yes, you can all go on to be forensic psychologists, and you'll all be child psychologists and what have you, when you know perfectly well that they're simply not going to be able to get to postgraduate. I mean, they're really not going to, and I just think it's poor. I've kind of come to the end, and I don't want to do it anymore and become sort of bitter and twisted. And
it sounds like you're already there, Chrissy. Let's be honest.
So I'm getting out before
even more bitter and twisted. Absolutely, no, absolutely, and as one should. So what's on the horizon?
Right. Okay. Well, what's on the horizon is I'm going to give up work entirely. We're going to go and live in Spain for a while, and I'm going to write a book. Possibly 2 books, if I can keep off the Rioja long enough.
So it sounds like you've got a plan ahead. You've got 2 books in line. So which would be the one you're going to start with? What are you going to be writing about?
Well, I'm going to do an academic book. I teach a course on the psychology of belief, and so I'd like to put together, if you like, a sort of textbook to go that would accompany that. If I go back to academia, I might do that.
I was going to say a textbook for all those lovely students out there for whom you care so much. so a book on the psychology of belief. So why people believe in stuff?
Well, but I was just talking about it. Not so much about belief, but about self-deception, because I've spent the last sort of 10, 12 years investigating this, the psychology of why do people believe in stuff. And the main thrust, it seems to me, of research in this area is looking at the differences, or trying to find differences between believers and non-believers. And I think that's actually the wrong question, because after 10 years of this, my sort of conclusion is that we're all actually very similar. I think almost all of us. I think all of us are believers in something. And depending on where you live and who you are and family and all those other kind of variables, suggests what it is that you believe in. So I think we're all believers. And so I'm more interested in how easy it is to be deceived, you know, how easy it is to fall for things that are completely erroneous, things that have no scientific merit whatsoever. And it's not just the paranormal, it's, you know, it's in all areas of life, really, health, education, as well as, you know, all the stuff that we usually talk about in terms of the paranormal. So there's that I'm interested in, this idea that, I mean, I do think that humans have this limitless capacity for self-deception. You know, it takes very little evidence of any kind to convince someone of any kind of nonsense. And some people, yes, we know, are susceptible to certain types of paranormal beliefs, but I think we're all susceptible to all kinds of self-deception. And it doesn't matter how intelligent you think you are, how educated you are, your gender, your age, background, you know, we're born to this stuff. In one of the talks I give, I do this lovely little bit of audience participation where I suggest, right, I'm going to give you all a little treat now. I'm going to show you how to spot a liar. Okay, so this is all about how you really spot a liar. And I talk about that program, with Tim Roth. Do you know the one I mean?
Lie to Me.
That's the one. And I say, right, that's all a load of nonsense. That's not real. You know, I'm going to show you now scientifically how you can spot a liar. And then I go through this whole silly rigmarole about body language and stuff. And I get people up on the stage and I do a little trick and I show them, I show them that I have spotted the liar. Okay, but the whole thing is actually just a stupid little trick. And they all fall for it, and then they all get very cross about it normally, that I've actually lied to them. But I say to them, well, look, the point is that you're all a bunch of very intelligent individuals, but I told you that I'll tell you how to spot a liar. So you all fell for it, to believe that it was possible to be able to spot a liar to that degree of success, which of course is nonsense. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of, really, in terms of putting this book together, is trying to show through some of the experiments I've done and people I've spoken to and experiences that I've had across the years, over the years, to illustrate how we're all susceptible to this stuff.
And Chrissy, can I ask you a question? I mean, so are you looking at these in terms of cognitive biases, or, I mean, I was having a discussion earlier with somebody and saying, you know, when you're a child, aren't you just lied to continuously? And is it then a surprise that children, as they get older and they're just lied to, you know, Santa Claus exists, God exists, you know, there's a reason to be here, blah, blah, blah. I mean, is it a bit of both that you're interested in, or?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's going to be a chapter, you know, is almost from the word go, we are lied to. We're taught to believe in stuff that is absolutely not real, and for some reason parents think that's acceptable. But then as you get older, like if you're 18 years old and you still believe in Santa Claus, then, you know, then you're considered to be impaired in some way. So from the start, we're taught to believe in stuff that's not real. So yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And where in our development across the lifespan do these things change? And I don't think they do. It's almost as if, you know, and I'm going to try and make this case in the book, that we have this innate need to believe. And one could argue, perhaps, I would like to know what you both think, that we are born to believe, and possibly it's because of this evolutionary idea that if we believe in something, then it might help to keep us all together. You know, there might be some sort of survival point to it, that if we all believe in the same thing, then we're going to be stronger because we're a group, that we all believe in the same stuff. So it's possible, perhaps, that there's this evolutionary point to it.
But I want to tease apart here what we mean by believe, then, because again, as being someone who at various points has explored this notion of belief, and like I said, I think all of our interests stemmed from that work, and it looked at paranormal belief. As you've said, Chrissy, much of that work for many years is saying, okay, well, people who we describe as, in quotes, believers, how do you distinguish them from people who don't believe? And broadly, it's all about belief in the paranormal or religious belief or something. So that's what you were saying about this kind of this need to believe. But this, for me, we've got to tease apart then what we mean by belief, because we have beliefs about everything because we have to in order to get through the day, in terms of we don't know everything around us. We have to make assumptions. We have beliefs about whether or not if I open that door, it will come towards me, move the other way. If I press a light switch, a light will come on. These are beliefs. But I think you're using the term to mean something about believing in something more than that, believing in either this idea of magical thinking or believing in things that include paranormal stuff, but other kinds of claims about the ways in which the world works, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned health, you know, all these sort of false beliefs that we have about health practices, for example, you know, and all the sort of ways that we're conned by you know, homeopathy and these kind of things, but how susceptible we all are to believing that these things work. And then of course you've got the placebo effect. So we know ironically that, you know, about 30% of the time we have the placebo effect kicks in, and it does work. So if you believe that something works, as you know, for some people, then the thing will work. So it's regardless of critically evaluating the evidence, I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. So you're right, Matt. Yeah, I am using this term. Belief is probably the wrong word, really, to use in this context.
And also there, we're using an example of the placebo effect there. Again, something fascinated by for many years, and many of the work, obviously, in terms of drug therapies, treat placebo effect as something that kind of get in the way of understanding what's really going on with the drug.
Yeah.
But from a psychological perspective, what you're suggesting there then is actually by having that belief that something's going to work can have an impact upon it. So I'm almost hearing that as being, isn't that an argument for believing in something? Because in those situations, the belief itself that taking the pill will have an impact seems to have an impact. So it's valuable to have the belief.
Well, that's another chapter.
Okay. Are we mapping out the whole book here? Are we?
Brilliant. I'm writing all this down.
I was going to say, is somebody recording this?
That's another chapter, the benefits of belief, because I think there are benefits to believing. Absolutely. You know, I've done some work where I've looked at whether people are happier if they believe in things, if they have certain beliefs, not necessarily religious beliefs, but, you know, if they just have a certain beliefs that there's something else out there. Astrology, you know, if they believe in all those kinds of things. Yeah.
So I think in those cases, about this idea, what we mean by belief then. So you are at least sort of talking about a belief about how you think things work by the world, the universe, or so on, whether you buy into, like you said, when you look at the work on paranormal belief that also touches upon other kind of religious belief, it will include things like belief in astrology. And for many people who are working within the area of parapsychology, you just go, oh, well, we're interested in things like extrasensory perception or psychokinesis, these apparent abilities of the mind. That's what we see as what we're interested in, not things like astrology, not things like the Loch Ness Monster and so on. They're kind of more fringe topics. But for others, that sits within this much broader area of either the paranormal or at least a really broad area of beliefs about how the universe works. And what you're feeling is that actually that scientifically these are ideas that aren't supported. So therefore, there must be erroneous beliefs. Why do we maintain those kinds of beliefs and things, given that the evidence seems to, time and time again, not support it? Yeah. So that seems to be the kinds of beliefs you're particularly interested in exploring in this way.
Yeah, I mean, but not just beliefs. I'm also going to broaden it out to look at other, if you like, susceptibility factors. So I mean, Louie mentioned cognitive biases. So there's things like, you know, my PhD was all about memory. So I'm going to talk a lot about that as well, how memory is so fallible and yet people don't realize it. So how memory impacts on what we believe, and how easy it is for us to be deceived because our memory plays tricks with us, and how we, you know, our whole sort of cognitive abilities, really, how they constantly let us down, how we see things we haven't seen. we hear things we haven't heard, and in the case of memories, you know, how we can actually remember events that never took place at all, you know, false memories. So there's all of that. So there's all that cognition as well, which is not necessarily about belief. It's just the way our brains work. You know, how vulnerable the abilities are. So there's that I'm keen to look at as well. Things like the misinformation effect. Oh, I've lost you. The misinformation effect, false memories, and how, you know, most of the work in that area has looked at susceptibility factors. You know, is there a, if you like, a personality that is more likely to be susceptible to false memories, a misinformation effect? But again, I'm quite interested in looking at well, how is it that some people seem to be immune to these things? You know, something like hypnotic susceptibility. You know, as you know, it's on a continuum. Some people make for very good hypnotic subjects, but why is it that some people are not good hypnosis subjects?
And is that also a belief thing? Because as I understand it, then obviously the role of suggestion is very important there.
Yeah,
being willing to follow a suggestion.
Yeah.
So again, you know, are we going to learn more about this idea again? Well, what is it? I'm always going back to this idea that distinguishes the believers from the so-called disbelievers. Is there some underlying personality factors that are going to predict the likelihood of somebody actually having belief in a whole range of things, and that could include their likelihood of being susceptible to things like hypnosis? If it's about this kind of idea of, I'm not going to believe or trust in something that's being told to me or suggested to me unless I have hard evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so again, is it going to have something of that feel where you're going to, if you're going to identify people who seem to be immune to these kinds of things, if there is anybody who is immune to it,
Mm-hmm.
are we going back to this idea of saying, well, how can we understand those people who differ from the believers, from the non-believers?
But I think it goes beyond just belief, doesn't it? I think it's more than just what you may or may not believe in. You know, you can have non-believers, so people who don't believe in the paranormal, etc., who are just as susceptible to suggestion, for example. It's not just about belief. Say something like social influence. You know, how someone can be influenced in what they've seen. So again, this is a memory thing, like memory conformity. So the idea that two people watch the same event, and if you question them about it, if one of the witnesses speaks first, that can influence the other witness. And you know, there's a whole bunch of work that's been done on this. You know, the Fiona Gabbard, etc. They've done all this brilliant work on memory conformity. So that's in a normal context as opposed to a paranormal context, and yet some of us are susceptible to conformity and can be easily persuaded by somebody else, and that also seems to correlate with belief in the paranormal as well, etc., and all these other things. But you know, I think there's out there. There's if you like another factor that perhaps binds all these things together, and it's not necessarily belief, it's not necessarily fantasy proneness and absorption and dissociation, you know, all those things that researchers in this area constantly look at. Yes, obviously there is this sort of pattern that does emerge, but I think there's something else which is beyond just looking at the paranormal. There's something else that seems to make somebody immune and somebody else susceptible. Now, I don't know what it is.
Oh, I was going to say, I was getting all excited actually from a seat thinking, yeah, go on and tell us.
Yeah, no, I mean,
is that the final chapter?
Yes.
the X factor or something like that. Finally, what brings it all to... I'm wondering, as you're saying these things, is it something about trust? Is it a willingness to trust others? Or put one sense of... Because and also this idea of how much it changes over time, because I know that as I've got older, I feel as though I've become more open to ideas that in the past I would have been immediately dismissive of, and thinking, well, that's quite clear, as in being very kind of brought up, in, in that way of scientifically minded and only if evidence is strong enough. And in some places, sometimes it's like, well, I'm interested in this idea of how much people are willing to put their trust into something.
Yeah.
And of course, things like religious belief and faith, well, that's essentially a trust or a faith in that sense. If a lot of people are getting their sense of beliefs from social norms or what their parents are telling them, you were saying there about the memory conformity effect, that maybe when you hear somebody else has said something, describe their memory, maybe their memory is more reliable than mine, or I trust what they're saying as much or more so than what I saw myself. So I'm wondering if that was one of those kind of bigger binding factors, a willingness to trust others.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion, actually. That it could be something like that. Yeah, I mean,
although trust, I mean, maybe is perhaps over egging it. I mean, if you're all a bunch of idiots, then just believing what a bunch of idiots believes doesn't necessarily mean you have an accurate idea of what the universe is like. I mean, I'm reminding of the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? I'm too stupid to know how stupid I am.
That's what I'm saying. But the idea of the trust thing wasn't necessarily saying having anything about the accuracy of the beliefs. It's the likelihood of a willingness to be influenced by others and accept what others are saying without other kinds of evidence or corroborating evidence. And maybe be more accurate.
But then maybe this takes us back to what I was saying earlier about raising children, and maybe one of the great problems with education is teaching children incorrect truths from the very beginning. And maybe we should just be very honest about what we know and what's real. And maybe that's what doesn't happen. And maybe that's why there isn't anybody who, can give up all of these ideas.
Well, I think we drone on and on and on about critical thinking, and it drives me nuts because, and I don't want to go moan about the skeptics, but I do get a bit tired of skeptics constantly saying, all right, we want to promote critical thinking, but I think it's slightly disingenuous, because I think we want people to think critically, but so long as they think the same way as we do.
Right.
I get that a lot from the skeptic community, I'm afraid, that it's all right if you think critically, but so long as you think critically in the same way that we do, that this is right and that's wrong. And I'm more interested in getting people to think for themselves rather than necessarily thinking critically, because we don't think critically, really, do we? Or we don't.
But then it is thinking for yourselves. I mean, does that mean we let people believe whatever they want, or is it helpful to tell children that the scientific evidence is there doesn't appear to be a God, there doesn't appear to be life after death, and therefore believing those things might not help you? I mean, is it good to leave people coming out of education believing whatever they want?
Well, I don't think we've got a choice. I think people, regardless of what we teach, they are going to believe what they want. Whether they actually think for themselves, though, something else. I don't think people do think for themselves. We tend to follow. I think we do trust. I mean, I like this idea of trust. I think that is possibly what is happening, is that people trust authority figures. We trust educators. We trust television. We trust the media, and we shouldn't.
That's and with that comes into, if you overly trust, if you misplace that trust, then you've got to balance it between. But I think there are times when there is valuable to trust, or there's elements where you have to, again, in terms of because as each individual we go through our lives not knowing everything, even about what the traffic is coming around the corner. There's a certain degree you have to work on this limited amount of information and draw out some assumptions based upon that. So I think there's a point where you have to trust, and I go back to some of the classic work on things like obedience to authority. That if a policeman starts flagging down the road, or somebody dressed as a policeman, your assumption has to be it's a policeman, and they're flagging down for a reason, for safety, because an accident's happened and so on. So you put trust into things all the time. You trust in authority, and that's why in the classic Milgram experiments, we're showing that when people then are asked to obey a malevolent authority, And lo and behold, many of the times people will continue to obey them and trust that they are being told something that they should be doing. So there will be times when, therefore, you are putting your trust into something, and like you say, you're not thinking for yourself, because there's so many times you have to not think for yourself. You have to trust that the people around you, the environment around you, is communicating something to you of use for you. And much of the time it is. It then reveals the times there are times you're going to be misguided. That's why magicians are so successful, because they can work on those assumptions and say, yeah, you assume this to be the case, but we can play around with that, manipulate it, and create what seem to be quite magical effects. You think, well, something was there a minute ago and it's not there now. Well, because I've been able to sort of play with your biases in memory, vision, sensation, and lots of other things. So yes, absolutely. I think it reveals how we are limited and how much we take in around us. And that's why I think it's valuable to at least show that we're having to rely on lots of these different sources of information in order to just get through the day. And that can include people having beliefs that many others would say are not true. And that's why I think there's some danger of saying, or telling people what they need to believe, because there are differences of opinion. I agree that this idea about, say, the classic life after death one, which is one that at least fascinates me, and many of us, when we look at these kinds of ideas, is that absolutely the evidence suggests this is what happens after we die, but not everybody agrees with that. So whenever my children ask those kind of questions, it's more like saying, well, some people think this, some people think that. Is that there's no accepted opinion on these things. There are ones where it comes from different sources of information. So the scientific perspective is one based on this way, but there are many, many millions of people in the world who believe something very, very different, and even very different religions. So I think it's very hard to sort of explore belief, I think, without getting into the whole religious belief, because that's one that frames many people's lives, and many communities, many nations, and so on. So I think you're into a really interesting area there, Chris, with all that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's a good example, actually, about the idea that there's life after death, and what I would say about that is that psychic mediums are not exploring the sort of philosophy of that, and that some people believe and some people don't. It's it's a con, and they perpetrate complete con. And I'm often asked, well, does it matter? Does it matter if someone goes along to see a psychic medium, and the medium says, oh yeah, little Johnny who died, he's all right, he's happy, he's fine, and the grieving parent goes away happy. What harm does it do? And well, I would say it does a lot of harm, because it grieving process. So in that instance, if my child asked me, well, what about this, Mum? Is this real? I mean, should I believe in this, or what do you think? And I don't know. I would be very clear to say, well, some people think this and some people think that. However, there are a lot of very bad people out there who pretend that this is real, and it's clearly not. I'm not a mum, by the way. I don't know.
And this connects up. We had a previous guest, Cal Cooper, who was looking at survival experiences and bereavement, and his, I remember we had a discussion about it, saying, he didn't care whether the experience was real or not, and it was a positive experience. And I remember saying, and it doesn't really matter whether people believe, if they think they're having a real experience, then that's good for them. But, I think from our perspective, or from my perspective, there is no life after death. So therefore, they're not having a real experience, and I think it's whether or not the truth matters.
Yeah.
Because you said it's all a con in a way, isn't it? Everything's a con in a way. I mean, we talked about self-deception earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is a con.
Everything.
Well, go on, Louie, unpack that more, because to me, a con is short for a confidence trick.
Yeah.
So therefore, go on. Everything's a con.
Well, you con yourself. We've discussed this numerous times on the podcast about, even the identity. Louie doesn't really exist. Yes, I've got memories, but those memories can't dictate how I behave in the future if I don't want them to. And everything is a con. You know, you go like Chrissy was saying, you know, health, or, you know, let's eat fruit because it's natural. It's great. You know, ricin is one of the most dangerous things in the universe, and it's natural. Just because something's natural doesn't mean anything. You know, it's levels of conning. I mean, you know, if you want to believe it's an ordered universe that was made by God, and you've got a soul inside you, and you're made in the image of God, and, you know, the universe was made for you, then so be it. And maybe you don't think it's a con if you have that opinion, you know.
Yeah, but the trouble with bloody psychic, this idea that you know, that it's not, how bad is it if someone goes to see a psychic and they tell them that, you know, little Johnny's okay. But, you know, I've never been more distressed than when I've seen, because I've been to a lot of these things, you know, I've been seeing a lot of these psychic mediums and various shows and what have you. And there's nothing more distressing than seeing some poor bugger in the audience crying their eyes out because they believe that this clown on the stage is telling them, oh yeah, I'm talking to your dead dad, he's happy, he's fine. You know, I mean, it's just awful. It's the most egregious thing for me to watch that, because I sit there knowing that this is utter crap, that the bloke on the stage is just a con artist. I deplore that so much. And I got myself into a lot of trouble in Australia once because I was watching one of these things, and I just stood up in the middle of the show and said, look, this is nonsense. All you're doing is cold reading, and this is, you know, how do you sleep at night doing this? And of course I got kicked out as the audience went crazy. I actually got removed from the building.
Can we book you for bar mitzvahs and christenings and things? Can you come to a christening and have a go at people and tell them what you know?
I'll be there.
Well, I think we have to also remind ourselves as well that Louie's got a fantastic clip that's on YouTube where he makes a very similar observation.
I called Christianity a cult on the BBC, if you remember, on Northern Irish TV. I mean,
it starts off as simply about mediumship, and our good friend Derek Akora was the actual context.
Yeah.
And very, very quickly, Louie was then, yes, calling Christianity a cult.
I will
anybody
say
who is infantile, I think that were the words he used.
I will say I was high as a kite during that particular.
Louie, it's brilliant. I've watched it many times.
Oh well, there you go. So you're the 1 million views then, Chrissy. Well, that explains it. I did wonder. Yeah, one of my finest moments. Well, you know.
But I find it interesting as well with mediums, particularly when it's in the context of now, which is, you know, this day and age is kind of going out, and one of the things at a local theatre can be seeing a medium, because as so-called entertainment, it's a really unusual one as entertainment, whether you believe in it or not, whether you think it's all utter crap, or even for the people who think, oh, there's something interesting going on here. It's not entertaining. It's not entertainment. You know, at best, you know, you're sitting there where one person apparently gives a message to somebody else, whether and if you think it's, you know, if you firm that belief thinking it's all made up and a con, then it's even worse. Even if you give it something, okay, well, this guy believes he's doing this, but it's not entertainment. You're seeing one person either reduce to tears for some reason by saying, well, actually,
they have to call it entertainment now, because I don't know if you.
How could he know? How could he know my middle name is Russell? How could he know that? How did he know my mother had knickers that were spots?
But
how could he know?
What suppose he meant? Okay, so Chris, I don't know what he's saying, and I remember it, you know, again, because Louie and I obviously were involved in that fantastically high scientific show, Most Haunted, and for many years, that could get away with what it was doing. I think on what was then satellite or broadcasting as opposed to terrestrial.
Yeah.
So there were different sort of Ofcom rules, and a big part of it is as long as it's framed as entertainment, you kind of get away with what you want. So I understand they're kind of framing it as such to get round to legal things. But I think given the people who are doing it and putting on shows and regularly going around the country and so on, you're there appearing in theatres, you know, charging £20 or more probably these days per ticket. So you kind of do it in the context, this is a show alongside stand-up comedy, a group the next day, maybe some kind of theatre. So it's being presented, even by the people doing it, as though I want you to come along, sit in an audience, see what I can do, and hopefully be amazed and impressed by it, like you would have seen a magician kind of thing. But then this idea is that it's meant to be it's not actually entertaining.
No.
Hearing somebody receive a message, and sometimes going on for ages, and it can feel, again, often it's really kind of poor messages and a bit vague and so on. It's just not entertaining. It's, even there, they should be sort of brought up against some kind of trade descriptions act. It's not entertainment. Don't pretend it is.
It's just appalling. It's absolutely appalling. But I guess, you see, I guess people want to believe that it's real, you see. So half of the people who go to these shows, they're not going to be entertained. They're going because they want to believe, and they want to go along and, I suppose, be convinced that it's real, that it is true, that individuals do have this ability, and that, maybe if I go along to one of these shows, she'll pick me and she'll tell me something about my past or my future.
I was going to say, sorry, but I was going to say, let's not be too critical of people. Alfred Russel Wallace was a massive spiritualist. Darwin used to say, look, grow the fuck up, you're a fucking retard. What do you mean he manifested a fucking sunflower? He pulled it out of his arse, you dickhead. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, Darwin didn't use quite those language, but you get people, Wallace will be remembered long after we're gone. And he was, he believed that he was, talking to spirits and things. And I think there is, like you're saying, it's just a will to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I rest my case that, we're all susceptible, and regardless of how smart we think we are, the very, very smart people believe in absolute nonsense.
So, but that's like you say, then you mentioned before, it's kind of the will to believe and people want to believe. So, and also you talk about possible cognitive biases. So are we still then sort of trying to distinguish between those in terms of, is it that you say maybe it's something innate or we're built to believe? Is there something to suggest that the way, and I know it's a combination of these things probably, so it's always like how it combines, how much of it can be down to, well, we are just built in such a way that we are going to make errors time and time again, because the way in which we think about stuff, the way in which our cognitive processes work are limited to such the point that we will end up coming to a belief about something which is simply wrong based upon our attempts to process the information, that side of it. And is that distinguishable from other types of biases, which could be described as, again, motivational biases, that are actually more we want to believe, as you keep saying, if we're built in such a way that actually that we would like things to be the case, and therefore we will misremember and almost bring into being some of these other kind of biases, but they're primarily ones because we have a need or a desire to believe, rather than simply it's because we're just poor at trying to make sense of the stuff around us.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's all of these things, isn't it? And personality traits as well. Personality factors. It all seems to be indicative of a pattern, doesn't it? They all seem to contribute. But why is it that someone like myself, for example, I could never be convinced that an event happened or that I have a memory that I don't think took place. You could tell me this event happened, okay, fine. That event happened, I can't remember it, but I don't have a memory of it. I could never be hypnotized. I can't go and watch, bloody Derek Acora or any of these clowns and be convinced that what they're doing is real. So how come someone like myself has some kind of immunity to this stuff that another person doesn't? So, that's the X factor, if you like.
Yeah, but even then, you're still describing it as though there's a bias in terms of your language there, an immunity to it suggests that, I'm immune to all these biases. I can kind of walk through the world in such a way and untarnished by all this stuff because I'm immune to it. Whereas people who then are more likely to be hypnotized or hypnotizable are not immune to it. And yet, of course, being susceptible to hypnosis is not necessarily a problem.
No,
it's not necessarily something which is an issue. It tells us something about the human condition. So yes, absolutely, I think you're touching upon the classic question of individual differences, why some people more than others. But I think this idea of describing oneself as being immune to these kinds of biases is, well, I'd be very careful about that. And I suspect that it not so much biologically so, this is an innate thing. I suspect it does have a lot to do with upbringing and schooling and other education and so on. And of course, in terms of memory biases, you've studied them. Doesn't mean, I don't necessarily mean you're immune to them, but it may well be you're less likely to be prone to them because you're more, I think some degree of knowledge about them is helpful. Once you know that there are these kinds of biases, you may be less likely to be susceptible to them. I don't think necessarily make you immune to them.
All right, no, you're right. Immune's the wrong word, I suppose. I was trying to think of a word that's the opposite to susceptibility, and immunity was.
I think Matt's being a bit hard on you there, Chrissy. I think immunity. I get what you mean. I mean, it's like language is you're being creative with your word. I think it communicates an aspect of. Because I was going to say when you were talking about being immune, I was saying we should. Why have we not mated, Chrissy? Because I feel the same way. I'm pretty much I'm immune to this bullshit too, and shouldn't two immune people shouldn't have mated by now and
well, there you go. On that note, shall I buy
immune offspring? Yeah.
You little flirt, Louie.
What was that? That prostitute, the bill, pornography. I'm going to be googling that afterwards.
No, don't. Please don't. It's not. You won't find it. It's not there. Don't Google it.
All right. So I've got to get some kind of video library and digitize it so everyone can see your embarrassing moment too.
Don't. It will be half hour of your life you'll never get back. Please don't bother.
Should we draw this episode?
Enough. Immunity is the wrong word, and I'm certainly not immune to memory biases. But I'll rethink that word, Matt. I will.
I don't want to be chasing too much by Louie, but we have often talked about, I think once you go down a certain route with language, you can find, and that's often we do, and a lot of psychological work is like that. We come up with these terms, or researchers do, and then whole theories are built in a way saying, but you kind of, another researcher's using different language, and therefore it's just a different way. So my feeling is, I understand what you're saying, this idea of why is it some people are more or less susceptible to these things. And I feel as though I suspect things like way people are brought up, those kinds of things have a huge impact. And of course, alongside that, there will be other kind of biological aspects of it. But my feeling is though, I think that's maybe because my interest is always broadly in social psychology.
You can acquire immunity. I mean, that's what a vaccination is. So I don't see what the big deal is personally.
No,
I still don't think. I think it's not immunity though. It's not because of immune means that these things will kind of just not happen. They will. I will not experience them.
I disagree, but anyway, I think we're.
But I don't want to get away with you and you.
I think we're splitting hairs,
Louie. So you, by all means,
you're cramping my style. You're cramping my style.
And on that note, maybe.
Thank you for joining us, Chrissy.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this wonderful podcast.
Thank you, Chrissy.
And brilliant. Thanks, Chrissy. Bye-bye.
We'll speak again soon and find out about your second book.
Yes, that's going to be a novel.
Oh, well, then we'll look forward to that one as well. Bye-bye for now, then. We'll leave it for now.
Bye.
Cheers, Matt. Bye, Louie. Bye.